enjoyed about it was, instead of just making it about, oh, she's getting corrupted and destroyed and chewed up and spit out by the underbelly of the industry, it's her part-time job that's doing that to her. Because she's just looking for a gig, because the reality of auditions for actors is hellish. So I've heard. And she needs some way to pay her rent. And so she gets a job at a company called Somnium, which does these weird deprivation tank, pharmaceutical laced dream sessions with insecure Hollywood people to help them achieve their dreams, whatever they are. And it's really nebulous exactly how this technology works, how this treatment works. It's very comparable to an episode of Black Mirror stretched way too long. And there's a Tarantino, sort of theory on filmmaking where he's talking about discrete scenes being stretched to their limit, just to get the audience right where you want them to be before you, give it to them. And this movie overstretches the whole thing. But there's reasons for why that happened. There's all these flashback sequences that, while they're good, on their own, really don't serve this movie enough. And there's a reason they exist. Because she was just trying to find some way to get her movie made. So in 2018, they went and shot all those flashbacks. And just used what Kickstarter money they had to make a sizzle reel to convince someone to help them make the rest of the movie. But at the same time, they're the thing that really takes you out of the nightmare dreamscape that this movie could have been. And that's disappointing, because when you're there, that's all that I wanted.
Welcome to Theater and Stream, a film podcast. I am Matt, that is Chuck, and this is episode 75. We're sort of back in our horror bag this week with a scrappy debut feature film from the up-and-comer Rachael Caine. Our featured review this week is Somnium. And let me tell you folks, it's been a year of promising horror directors making their mark. And I have to ask, have we found yet another one? We'll get back to that question a bit later in the show. But for now, we have a very important news story to cover that I think if you're taking the time to watch this show, this probably affects you in some way. So stay tuned for that very, very shortly. Next, after that, we're going to be moving on to the Watchlist, which is just bursting at the seams with a varied selection of titles. And of course, we're going to be bringing the show home by giving our non-film recommendations with the Mentionables. Please do like and subscribe if you haven't done so already, just to let us know how we're doing here at the channel. But otherwise, Chuck, anything else you wanted to mention before we got into the show?
Just a very brief and deliberately vague call for everyone to just turn down the temperature and be nice to each other. I think you all maybe know what I'm talking about, but given my job, I can't escape it, and I have to express some thoughts on it, other than some of the people I know who likely are going to lose their jobs this week because of things they said online. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I'm a free speech absolutist, and I disagree with that. But on to what's been actually occupying us, the reality of digital ownership. We're well documented. We've known the score for years on this issue, and now finally there is a lawsuit going against Amazon, who I had always assumed was at least one of the more trustworthy, storefronts you could for this kind of thing, because in theory, they're too big to fail. It's not like with Sony where they're just like, oh, you have all these, movie purchases through your PlayStation account. Sorry, we're just going to get rid of all that shit. In my family, we will make the occasional purchase for something if it's cheap enough. just so we can have it in our library, because we're constantly shifting on which streaming platforms we subscribe to. And goddamn it, you have to be able to watch Coraline and the Mummy whenever you fucking need to, because that's just what the wife or the kids want.
Mm-hmm.
And I had collected a few movies on there in the past, like Predator and Goodfellas, and like the Neon Demon. That was the only way that you could like own the Neon Demon, because it was a Prime exclusive when it came out. But now because of some legislation in California, the issue is at the forefront, because they've made it explicitly clear that you have to make it explicitly clear when someone isn't actually buying something and just getting it, like a license that could be revoked at any moment. But is that the gist of this situation?
Yeah, pretty much. So basically, what happened was a class action lawsuit was filed in Washington State in federal court saying that,
In federal court.
like,
Okay.
yeah, in Prime Video's usage of the words like buy and purchase, they think it's a bait and switch tactic. And because you are, in fact, only being granted a revocable temporary license, like that in and of itself is a fact. And they say that there's a bunch of fine print saying that, not only can they substitute the movie for a different version of the movie whenever they want, but they could, if they lose the license to the particular movie, they could just flat out remove it from your digital library and you just don't have it anymore. And they have no obligation to provide any sort of compensation to you. And so the example they used for this was Downton Abbey, which is really interesting. That if you bought that show on Amazon back when the seasons were releasing from 2010 to 2015, you now no longer have access to that show on Amazon.
That should be a crime.
Yeah, it really should be. Yeah, because I mean, and you imagine it's even worse for a TV show than a movie, because I'm sure those seasons at minimum probably cost, I don't know, $30 probably. And so, yeah, you're probably out now $150 because of that. And yeah, it really, really sucks. And I hope that this, makes some progress. There was a similar case that happened in 2020 where Amazon basically, their argument was, consumers inherently understand the concept of a limited license when buying a digital product, because, digital products have been around now for, I don't know, I guess at this point, 20 or so years, way, way back when we were buying, songs on iTunes, I guess, in the early 2000s. And so they argue that, consumers understand this concept. I think they even went so far as to open up a Webster's dictionary in the courtroom, and the lawyer literally like read like the definition of like limited license or like license or whatever. And so yeah, they're getting into the nitty-gritty, the finer details with this shit. And so I don't know, what are your thoughts on this? What should be done? Say that this case goes through and they win against Amazon. What do you think should be the final outcome of that? Like, what changes?
It would be the most major pro-consumer thing to happen this millennium, this century. Because that's been the whole crux of it. Like, back in 2008, my freshman year of college, I used an Apple iTunes gift card to buy the week by week iTunes access to the current season of Lost, so that I could have it. And a few years ago, I did notice I no longer have that in my iTunes library, nor do I have the episodes of South Park that I bought to watch on my iPod Classic during class when I was bored. Those things are gone. And if it's that capricious, that if that's how they want it to be, If they want to maintain the status quo like Amazon and all these companies, then things should cost a hell of a lot less. They should cost as much as a rental, for us to have until the license is revoked. There should not be a premium price on this stuff.
Yeah.
If I am paying upwards of $20 or something like that, then either I get my money back and there's just like an account that just has rolling credits added to it as they add and remove things. That would be more equitable. That would be more fair, to the consumer. And so I can see this inspiring a lot of, no pushing those buttons, buddy. My God. But because this is going to be the one of two federal cases we're going to talk about today between this and my mentionable. But I do know a little bit about the mechanics of this. California state law is California state law. The fact this is coming from someone in Washington is interesting. Because, if it happens in federal court, that becomes the law of the land, the precedent going forward. And either that would require federal legislation out of DC, I'm sure like the Amazon and like the whole like media apparatus, their lobbyists are already gearing up to try and codify their preferred version of this in the event that this, doesn't go their way. And then at the same time, it's going to be incumbent on us as citizens to make sure that our legislators know what we want to happen. What would be better for all of us involved? Because like this is like you put in the doc, this is reminiscent of the Stop Killing Games issue. Where these always online games that whether they're single player, multiplayer, open world or not, it requires expense and servers to maintain them, and it is a difficult proposition for a business to be like, why should we support a game that isn't making us money anymore? And they have the very reasonable take, which is, well, we're just not going to maintain these servers any longer. There's not enough people involved. It's a niche thing at this point. Not everyone's playing it, so why are we supporting it? But then there should be an exit strategy in that event. But this is different. This is movies. This is something that we can have without them. If they still made physical media as universally as they used to, I could own the Neon Demon on Blu-ray and be totally fine. But if one day they can just be like, oh, we pissed off Nicholas Winding Refn, so we're going to take all of the content he made with us off. And I can no longer see Copenhagen Cowboy or the Too Old to Die Young. Like that would be a shame, because that represents that artist's creative output over like the last 10 years, just gone. In the event that should happen, and then they're killing art. So if they don't want it anymore, I guess the argument is, it's not on Amazon. You can get it somewhere else now. That's fair. But there should be a transferability of these licenses. If I have bought it from Amazon, it should be honored by somebody else.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that totally should be the case. I like your idea of sort of having like these rolling credits where it's like, if your license runs out, then you should just refund me, like refund my account or something like that. I think that's a good start. And the thing that sucks about, the physical media thing, because physical media, I think, is sort of, it's having a resurgence, and that's partly because of people are realizing the stakes here like we are. And then also because of the pandemic, people wanted to buy shit to put in their house during the pandemic. And so physical media like took off again. And the thing that really sucks though is that like with Best Buy, Best Buy doesn't carry Blu-rays and DVDs in 4K anymore. Target doesn't carry that stuff anymore. Walmart still does, but it's, very scaled back. And so Amazon is like one of the places to go for physical media nowadays. It's cheap there. It's, they carry a lot of weird stuff. And so what happens when, I almost see like a situation where if Amazon doesn't get their way with this, they're like, well, we're not going to carry physical media anymore, like
That'd be
because of
quite the
this, you
threat.
know. Yeah, and so I mean, there are plenty of
Well,
other places I guess you could go. Like, I mean, Best Buy Online still carries physical media, and Target Online still carries physical media, but they just don't in their stores anymore, so that you can still go to other places. But yeah, it'd be an interesting scenario where Amazon would be able to like dangle that in front of everybody because they just have so much power.
I have another compromise. They give you a notification that your limited license is about to be pulled, and they give
Mm-hmm.
you the opportunity to buy a physical version of the movie at a steep discount.
Yeah, I could totally see that. You know,
Yeah,
Voodoo, when they were owned by Walmart, did a very similar or sort of similar thing that I took advantage of a couple of times, where you could go on Voodoo and you could buy a version of the movie that they called disc plus digital.
yeah,
And basically, what that meant is you could, for like a discounted price, you could get the digital version of whatever movie you were buying ASAP at that moment, but then they would also send you a disc when you hit the purchase button, like through the mail.
that's
And
cool.
so that was cool, but unfortunately, you know, of course they sold it to, you know, I think Fandango owns Voodoo anymore. It's not even
Mm.
called Voodoo anymore. And so they stopped doing that because, you know, Fandango has no, you know, storefront. It's like a movie ticketing service or whatever. So
Well, and there also used to be
yeah.
things like that. If you bought a physical version, sometimes you would get a digital version along with it. That ultraviolet copy,
Oh yeah, yeah,
yeah,
and that still is the case.
that still is the
That's
case.
yeah, that's pretty much the only reason I have a substantial digital movie collection is because I I just redeem, you know, those little you get those little inserts in your DVD case, you know, with the code on it. And that's pretty much the only reason I personally have a digital movie collection because I try to avoid buying digital movies when I can. Um but yeah, personally, you know, my solution for this, I was thinking about this, and you know, in addition to yours, I think what would be a good sort of in tandem solution would be I personally don't think that storefronts need to go so far as to stop using the word buy. You know, I think the word buy is just too convenient. It's too I don't even know what word they would use, you
Yeah,
know, in place of that. But what I would personally like to see is like some sort of little like footnote below the buy button or something like that where you know, like a couple months ago or weeks ago, AMC, they now include on their website when you go and you look at showtimes for movies, they have that little like footnote on their website that says like the movie begins 20 to 25 minutes after the posted showtime. And they started doing that because the state of Delaware passed a law basically saying they had to do that. And then they just said, you know, screw it. We're just going to put this on our website because it's too much of a hassle to just cater to
yeah,
people in Delaware. And so, what I would like to see is I want to see a little like hyperlink below the buy button on every digital purchase on Amazon that says, you know, something to the effect of like, this purchase grants you a limited license. What does that mean? And then you can click on the hyperlink and it'll, you know, it'll tell you, it'll give you the explanation. It'll say this is what this means in this case,
yeah.
because you know, apparently people are uh you know, they don't understand what that means these days, even though we've had this stuff for like 20 years, which, you know, I don't blame, you know, older people, younger people maybe don't understand that, but yeah, that's kind of what I would that's the compromise I would like to see because I think it's completely unrealistic to expect them to get rid of the buy button. You know, I don't even know would it even say? Would it just say like licensed button or like
Yeah, like
yeah.
add to library.
Oh,
Like
add to
that
library.
that
Okay,
could be
okay.
the semantical answer. It's like you're just
Hmm.
adding it to your library. You don't own it on this account. This is just what you can watch whenever you want to. Because like one anecdotal thing that my family did experience was we bought, quote unquote, the 1999 The Mummy. And we
Yeah.
went to turn it on one day, and it started playing the Tom Cruise version. And
Okay.
I don't know if this is
Weird.
exactly related, but it was almost like, oh, we don't have it on streaming anymore on Prime,
Hmm.
so we are going to shift to the one we do have in the
Hmm.
code. And then that altered which one we had a license for, from one The Mummy to a different The Mummy. And
Hmm.
like I had to like email customer support and be like, "Hey, you're not playing the right movie for me." And they really didn't do anything, about it. And then like months later, it just started working again and playing the right movie. But it changed like the poster art in the app and on PC. Like what we had the license to was no longer the one we paid for,
Hmm.
which is just bizarre. But
Yeah, we'll have to see kind of how this all shakes out because I will, as sort of to close us out on this, that 2020 lawsuit that we mentioned, where they sort of commented on this, that did eventually get dismissed about a year later.
mm,
So
yeah,
we'll
because
see if that kind of happens with this too. But I do think that, I'm glad you brought up the California thing because I think that that kind of ticks the box or ticks the, a little bit closer to like the pro consumer end of things. So I don't know, maybe that is enough to kind of sway this a little bit more than it did in 2020.
yeah,
I guess we'll have to see.
if enough states get on board, much like this age verification movement, has,
Mm-hmm.
eventually the titans of industry will have to respond in some
Yeah.
way. And it could be a monkey's paw curling moment, like with porn, where instead of just doing what the law is demanding, the companies just say, okay, well, we're just not going to serve your constituents anymore. Like because in North Dakota right now, if you're using your internet provider, which is
Yep.
hard locked geolocated to the state you're in, they will know that they can't just offer you up porn on Pornhub anymore, and you get a message saying, "Hey, sorry, your legislators are mean. You can't watch what you want to watch," and they could very well just like I don't think it's gonna go there because they want our money. Like people in
Mhm.
rural states probably use Amazon. Like there may not be enough of those people, but they use it a lot. Like my hallway is just stacked. Like the entryway to my building is just stacked with Amazon shipments all the time.
Oh yeah.
Especially now that they're building like an Amazon receiving center in Minot to like better serve the distribution in this area. I can't imagine they're going to invest in infrastructure like that and then just be like, well, we're not going to be in North Dakota anymore because you passed this law. Like that's not how it's
Yeah.
going to work.
Hmm.
Um, moving on to the watch list. I, love me some, just lean, mean, indie flavored, sort of, movies, whatever they might be, horror thrillers. This is a car chase heist movie called Eenie Meanie, starring Samara Weaving and Carl Glustman. And, she's this, girl who, from a very young age, her dad was just like a gearhead and like taught her how to drive really well to escape the cops when she's driving him home from the bar drunk and she doesn't have a license yet. And somehow she kind of becomes like a baby driver for a bunch of like organized crime, like armed robbery type people. And we catch up with her when she's trying to go straight and get her life together. She's a teller at a bank and she finds out that she's pregnant by her dirtbag ex-boyfriend who she used to do crimes with. And she shows up to just break the news to him and tell him, "Hey, I'm pregnant." And two guys have guns to his head, and before you know it, like you're just on this like crack fueled speed run from like one like little set piece to another for like the first 45 minutes of the movie. I don't want to spoil it because it's just so balls to the wall. And eventually it settles down and she finds out, oh, he owes this guy I used to work for a lot of fucking money, like millions of dollars. And this guy, you know, can't even afford enough money to like have clothes, like proper attire half the time. And the only way to keep the father of her unborn child alive is to take on a gig to rob a poker game at a casino. So you get like a little bit of, okay, here's the heist, here's what we're gonna do, let's get the team together. But it does have a neat little beating heart within it that it's like if in Drive they actually gave you a backstory to who the driver was and what his deal was, why he was the way he was, and so you get some room to breathe as the backstory and her own motivations and stuff is explored a little bit, and the ending to it really is surprising. I did not see it coming, but
Okay.
as it happens, it's totally rational. And there's actually this really beautiful, like, really extended scene between her and God, the guy, the bad guy from Ocean's 11, Andy Garcia.
Oh, Andy Garcia.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because he plays the crime boss who's like organizing the heist. And in the aftermath of what happens, she's just like in his house and explaining to him, like what happened, and and spilling the beans on some other characters that were kind of betraying him. And they have this moment where they come to this understanding, and it's like it comes out of nowhere because they don't get that deep anywhere in the movie until that moment, and they just stay with it, and you're just expecting like a Breaking Bad-esque I'm going to show up and just murder everyone thing, and it doesn't go there. And it has this like neat and tidy cutesy little ending, and it's so bittersweet. I didn't expect it, but as a diversion, little streaming, straight to streaming movie, really, pretty good for what it is. Marshawn Lynch shows up as a rival, getaway driver, and he's like literally just dressed as a pimp at all times. And like, I'm surprised, like that dude really should act more. I know he was in Bottoms, but I was surprised to see him in this, and he did a good job for being a former professional football player.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that this was like straight to streaming, and one thing I always wonder these days, especially now that we're like so far removed from the pandemic, is why do studios choose to release movies on straight to streaming still? And I'm curious, as now that you've actually seen this movie, what do you think is the idea behind that? Like, do you think this was just like completely unmarketable as a theatrical movie, or like it doesn't have enough like big names attached to it, or
Yeah,
what? What do you think is that reason?
not enough big names. It had a budget of $50 million from a first time writer director,
Okay.
and it's like it's a tweener situation where it's not indie enough that taking the risk on a theatrical release would pay off, and yeah, it just would not have moved the needle enough because people have stopped seeing the $100 million slop films that they're making too, enough to make them profitable. So the industry needs a reset in some way before like a movie like this could be in theaters again. Until then, straight to streaming is the only way to get it.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I wanted to watch this. My Hulu subscription ran out, and I didn't resub yet, but I did want to see this. So yeah, I definitely
Well,
want to check that out.
do you have a Disney? Doesn't it come
No, I
packaged
don't.
in? Okay.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
guess I don't have Disney Plus anymore either, but yeah, I guess they are kind of doing that now. It's all kind of one app now, isn't
Yeah. Sorry for the view of my son's saggy diaper.
it?
Um, but yeah, because that's where I watched it. Because like I did the thing where I just said, "Show me everything you got on Disney
Yeah.
Plus," because there was a moment in time where like suddenly people were seeing like hardcore R-rated films mixed in with their Disney fare unexpectedly, and they had to be like, actually, we want to make sure you want this." So I
Yeah.
gave them the go ahead, And now whenever my kids are watching Disney movies, they see the Alien Earth logo and they go, "Oh, no, scary. Don't put that on. I don't want to watch that." And I'm like, I wasn't going to put it on. It's a bit much for you. And
Yeah.
moving on, I don't have
Yeah.
HBO right now, so I can't watch this, but should I reconsider given what is Task worth it?
Yeah, I think it's Task is pretty good. This is from Brad Illingsby, the creator of Mayor of Easttown. So, and it's very similar. So, I mean, if you want to distill it down to a simple question, it's like, did you like Mayor of Easttown? And if yes, you should probably watch Task because this is very, very similar. This guy definitely has a pocket. Dark, gritty crime dramas about working class people, I guess would kind of be his usually in the northeast of the United States. They're set in, and this one's no different. Basically, Task splits the narrative between the cop and then the criminal that he's hunting. It's very, Heat-esque. Mark Ruffalo is this FBI agent who's assembling a task force to bring down this group of criminals that are basically robbing gang hideouts,
Ah,
and like stash houses, that type of thing. And I don't think, we don't get a lot of these shows anymore. Like shows like this were like the bread and butter of the 2010s, like prestige crime dramas like True Detective, um, like Ozark, The Killing, uh, The Night of, like those type of shows. Those were
yeah.
like the bread and butter of the 2010s. And it kind of brings about an interesting question for me. It's like, have we gotten enough of these shows now that certain elements of them have become ripe for parody? It kind of reminds me of the prevalence of like music dramas that inspired Walk Hard, them to make Walk Hard,
Yeah.
where there are definitely things in this show that have me just rolling my eyes because they have just become so like just like a hallmark of these types of shows. Like I'll give an example. So every morning before he goes to work, the grizzled FBI agent has to dump the entire contents of his ice maker from his freezer into his sink, and then he dunks his entire head into the ice cold water just to feel something, man. He's just got to do it so he feels something. And otherwise, he's drinking, a fifth of vodka every night, and he doesn't he doesn't get anything out of his life anymore. And it's just kind of like, okay, come on. Like this is really becoming, like really overdone at this point. And the criminal, the main criminal played by Tom Pelfrey, he spends his days, having a heart of gold where he's taking care of his dead brother's kids, and he's having existential discussions with his coworkers about what their perfect lives would be if they had all the money in the world. And then at nighttime he's robbing criminals, and he's beating up like drug dealers. And so it's kind of like, this stuff is becoming pretty well worn,
Yeah.
but I don't think it necessarily makes the show bad. It's you can only slight the show so much for the year it was happened to be released in. It's still very well executed for the most part. Tom Pelfrey, I had just mentioned him. His performance is really good. I'm not really familiar with this guy. I know he has been in a lot of like shows, like he was in the aforementioned Ozark. I think he had a pretty big stint in that show, but he's great. And every time it goes back to the Mark Ruffalo character, I'm like, no, no, go back to the other guy. Like
Yeah.
I don't care about the Mark Ruffalo so much. And so yeah, it's pretty good. It's pretty good stuff. It reminds me of shows that we don't really get that much anymore, and it really reminds me of like that 2010s era HBO,
Hmm.
type stuff. So
Nice little throwback. It also
yeah,
reminds me of a series from Apple earlier this year called Dope Thief. I didn't
yeah,
watch all of it, but the premise is very similar because like they're robbing stash houses, but it has that hook of they've robbed someone they shouldn't rob because it was there was an undercover FBI or like DEA agent at the stash house, and not only that, the drug empire people just want their fucking money back and like know who they are enough to like maybe try and find them. And
Sure.
but hey, it's ripe for the picking because yeah, we don't get a lot of that these days. I accidentally subscribed to AMC Plus, and just kind of like ate the charge, and I'm enjoying it for a month. But with it, I was able to watch things like Nautilus, which it wound up being not worth talking about at all because there's a reason why Disney didn't want it. But I also watched the limited series version of the movie Blackberry, which only added like 15 minutes, to the overall runtime. But I'm late to the party, but really, really fun. And if for no other reason than it just completely takes you back to that pre-smartphone world and gives you a story, which is what I love, which is like what is happening in these unprofessional, ramshackle, innovators, like RIM, in that time. And at the same time, it's well trodden ground. How does it all fall apart? But it was interesting to like see them make the case for the smartphone to like Verizon executives, and then seeing the consequences of it, and all the things they needed to do to keep the wheels moving and keep their growth going. And then eventually it's a runaway train. You're making more money than God. And what does that do to you? The change in Lazaridis' character, the Jay Baruchel, character, from being this unconfident, just nerd, who's a brilliant genius with great ideas and who can solve any problem, especially if there's a buzzing coming from a piece of technology. But even he eventually just turns into a hair slicked back, like boardroom creature by the end of the movie. And it had some amazing moments. My favorite character though is the one played by the director, whose name I can't remember right now. He's the dude,
the guy with the headband.
The guy with the headband, because throughout the movie, he's making these references to like pop culture like constantly. But there's this one like moment where he's like, his movie nights were just because he's the guy that we keep it fun. We keep this like a frat house, party. And, anytime we're going through a stressful situation, we'll see it through because we're just going to take care of each other and just keep it, a place that isn't just going to, grind us into a pulp. And so he's like, all right, guys, original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And before he makes that announcement, he's like giving people a tour, and he makes a reference to that part in the original TMNT movie where Sam Rockwell's showing the kids the Foot Clan Wonderland with like the skate park and everything. And he leaves to go get the DVD from somewhere. And then Michael Ironside shows up and is just destroying the atmosphere. And they cut back to him like rocking out on his cassette tape, in his car to the song that plays in that scene. Like there's like, it was so literate in terms of the pop culture of the moment, what those people would care about, like when they're trying to figure out, how can we solve this bandwidth problem? We need to hire all the best geniuses from all the other tech companies to solve this problem for us. And he's like, hire John Carmack. He's just yelling that through the glass. He's not even really sure he can be heard. But Matt Johnson, oh God, did a really good job, and I really liked it.
You want to pick up with the paper?
But speaking of obsolete technology, I've seen ads for this constantly. And from the moment I heard it was announced, I was stopped at it. But does this Office sequel, The Paper, work? Or is it as dead on arrival as the medium in which I owe my livelihood?
Yeah, it's it's okay. That is what I'll say. I mean, I only seen a couple episodes right now. This is, of course, this is the new show from Greg Daniels, the creator of or co-creator of The Office. Obvious, like the biggest comedy, half-hour comedy show probably of all time. And this is also the direct continuation of The Office in that it's set in the same universe and has characters from that show popping up. Um, and I guess for me, I consider myself a fair weather fan of The Office. I recognize, what it did and how funny it is, but it's really only a show I watch when it's on TV, which happens to be a lot, or when my wife wants to rewatch it. But um, this show is, I guess, if I say anything about it, it's more interesting in that it's inherently less funny. And I think that comes down to the decision to set this show at like a newspaper, I guess I would say a medium-sized town's newspaper in the year 2025. And because of that, there is this sort of weird, like inherent, like all over the show of every joke is sort of, or most of the jokes are sort of cut with the sort of fact that, oh, this paper is failing, and or like, oh, we're just struggling to get by. And every show kind of has that, lining to it, or every joke has that lining to it. So it's inherently, there's this, it's a weird balance where it's like, in The Office, Dunder Mifflin, would occasionally have these storylines that would be like, oh no, like we're gonna get subsumed by a bigger company, or we're gonna get bought out, and stuff like that. But it was never like the through line of the show. Whereas on this show, that seems to be the through line. It's like, how are we gonna get by? How are we gonna rise above, just becoming a newspaper that just like collects all of the AP articles and just throws them into the newspaper template every week. And so that's kind of the undercurrent of the show, which does make, it does give it a different vibe than The Office. And so if that's what you're looking for, I guess, this is probably a better show for you. But for me, I was expecting, sort of the laughs per minute to be a little bit more, and I don't know if I'm gonna keep up with it. I guess I will if my wife wants to keep watching it. But yeah, I'm curious as to your thoughts as a newspaper man. Do you have any interest in this, or do you think like does it hit too close to home for you, or can you laugh at these types of things? I don't know.
I may have to give it a shot, just
Yeah.
because ultimately, what it's mining is very relevant to me,
Hmm.
because like I work in a 100-year-old building that has like almost 90% empty desks. Like there's this whole section of the building behind me where the old school paginators used to lay everything out, which has now been reduced to two desks with computers, and
Sure.
like since I've been hired in 2022, I'm the only reporter that hasn't quit.
Mm.
Everybody else has either quit or been fired in that time in between. And then it's just the two other editors, who have been there for like 30 plus years. Those ladies are, machines. They're never going to quit. They're never going to retire because there's no one to replace them, in that sense. It's like the
Hmm.
the industry is bottoming out so hard. Anybody who got like a print journalism degree, they're not going to work at a newspaper. They're going to, if they're lucky, work for a website, of some kind of online banner, or they're just going into public relations. Like that's the alternative. Like they're not doing, journalism at all, because the money isn't there. The jobs are certainly there, obviously, because like what I didn't understand about the premise of the show itself, because I just saw in the trailer, oh, we're gonna have a team of volunteers, and I'm like, they can't even convince people to do this for money. Who would just do this for fun? Like, because that's also kind of impossible to find. Like, there's someone who just wants to be like, oh, I live in this tidal town. I'm going to contribute articles. That doesn't happen. But from what I understand, they are employees of the larger paper conglomerate who are just like volunteering to like give a few hours a day or a week to the paper. Like that's the basic gist, which I guess is more realistic, but as far as like would I be able to laugh at it as much, it's different, compared to The Office, cuz it didn't matter what kind of company you worked for. The culture and environment and archetypes within that show were universal.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily think that can be true of this, cuz they're just filling it with what appears to me to be just like wacky characters who would not be tolerated in a regular newsroom environment. It's like a Dwight Schrute could conceivably exist in the real world, and I just don't know if that's the case for, like, I don't know, a lady whose idea of journalism is just making listicles. Like, I don't know that that's the case.
Yeah, it definitely does have like the characters are definitely a lot more out there than the people on The Office. The people on The Office are definitely more relatable. This is like, if I had to compare it to anything, it would be like sort of the personalities of like the characters on like Brooklyn Nine-Nine, where
Oh, okay.
that show was definitely more like heightened than something like The Office. The Office was definitely more relatable, and you could like pick out people from your actual life that resembled the people in that show. Whereas, yeah, this is bigger personalities, and I'm sure by the if this show lasts like 3 or 4 seasons, I'm sure like by the end of it, everybody's going to become flanderized. Everybody's going to be just the nth degree of what they are now. And but I don't know if I'll be watching that long, so I won't know that. But
If it survives to a second season, I'll watch it. That's my commitment to
sure.
you, the audience. If you because my my ad director stopped by and asked me if I was interested in it, and the way that he described it, was that if you were going into it looking for like a serious, exploration of the issues of the modern newspaper, you're not really going to have a good time. And, just go along for the ride of the zaniness. And that's fair, but not really what I'm looking for right now.
Sure.
A movie from last year I was able to watch, September 5th, which is about the Munich Olympics Israeli hostage crisis, which I was already very familiar with because I saw the HBO documentary, the Academy Award winning HBO documentary, One Day in September, which gives a very definitive overall, like overhead view of the thing. This just puts you squarely in the broadcast booth of the NBC Sports Olympics team covering the games, and how they just kind of found themselves the best positioned to cover the event as it was unfolding. And it's kind of a news theme to the show today in that way.
Yeah.
And I honestly really did like it because it got into all of the, like the split second decisions, the lengths they had to go to get like the singular shots that they needed, keeping Peter Jennings hidden in in the apartment building, in the Olympic Village, so that he could, give like his, feet on the ground view of what was going on. And, it's a worthwhile watch. It has that boiler room intensity because I think they maybe go outside once in the whole movie to like stand on a roof and watch helicopters flying away. And other than that, they stay within the confines of the broadcast situation. And a pretty, good movie. I know it was nominated for some Academy Awards. I don't know specifically which ones, but the, the editing, it was pretty up there. They did a good job of keeping everything visually interesting and moving along. And the the part that's like the most devastating though is because like there was the initial report that after they had gone to the airport and the German special forces had gone in to do their rescue when they had them all boarded on the plane that wasn't going to leave. The initial report that came out was that all of the hostages survived. So everyone's just like relaxing and they're drinking beer, they're high-fiving, they're talking about how great this is going to be for their careers. And there's just one dude who doesn't trust it. It's like we have it from one person, so in the German government saying that this is what happened, and he doesn't trust it. And of course, we all know the outcome in the present, but in real time, just seeing like the work that had to happen in like mere minutes for them to realize that they had fucked up, and then to try and get the real answer and get the truth out there, like that's the best part of the movie, because the actors all did a really good job of shifting gears, seemingly like in the moment, from elation and relief to, okay, let's get back to sports, to, oh fuck, we were the first ones to put this out there and we were wrong. But and seeing like the internal decisions, it's like if the person above you is saying run it, even though you have misgivings about it, should you really take ownership of it? Like how much guilt should you feel in a situation like that? If you're just the guy running the actual broadcast versus the guy running the wider show. But it's worth a watch, especially if you're interested in that event. It's got a really good cast, and they did a really good job with the material.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've always had this one kind of on my personal watch list, and it seems a lot more like, it said, I think the whole quote that comes up there is like one of the best thrillers in years, and it does seem more, thriller, or like more edge of your seat and more interesting than stuff like, because a lot of this stuff is really just does not get me going these days, as far as like, I don't know what I would compare this to before, I had heard your words about it, but maybe like The Post, like the Tom Hanks movie, The Post, and like
the driest, most boring version of that story. Because The Post is really self-important.
Yes.
This kind of, is more honest about what's really going on. There's no backslaps, going on, or like they're not, it's not like a hagiography for journalism. It's like, it's like these people were doing like groundbreaking, work for a sports broadcast team, suddenly finding themselves in the most important story in the world at that moment. But, it was more honest about how a journalist's integrity is a precious thing that they have to cling to, and just how easily it can get cast aside for selfish reasons outside of who you're talking about and the wider implications of that. And so, it was about something more than people saying like, oh, we have to stick up to fascists, This is more true to what happens every day in a newsroom, I think, especially in the modern times. In that sense, though, it's a great, like you could watch this and then watch Munich right after, another Steven Spielberg movie. It's a great double feature.
Oh yeah,
about similar themes and subject matter. Moving on to the main event today, the first film from, I guess I'll call her young, even though she's probably in her 30s by now, a filmmaker named Rachael Caine. And after watching the movie, I did some research and I found a cool little like essay she wrote for Movie Maker, talking about what it took to make her movie. How much like the character of Gemma in Somnium, she showed up in Hollywood with a dream at 22, wanting to realize the story that she had, and just the perseverance and patience it took her to go from 2012 to 2025 and come out with a movie on the other side of it. And I love those kinds of stories. I love it when it's scrappy and a filmmaker has to get creative, to find ways to make their thing happen. And on that level, it makes me very forgiving for the things where in this movie the seams are showing and the cracks in the story are evident. Because this is not so much a horror movie, like in the most explicit sense. This is not a jump scare per minute sort of experience. It's not even really that disturbing, as disturbing as it could be. This hard on your luck, Hollywood naivety sort of story is pretty pat. But what I enjoyed about it was, instead of just making it about, oh, she's getting corrupted and destroyed and chewed up and spit out by the underbelly of the industry, it's her part-time job that's doing that to her. Because she's just looking for a gig, because the reality of auditions for actors is hellish. So I've heard. And she needs some way to pay her rent. And so she gets a job at a company called Somnium, which does these weird deprivation tank, you know, pharmaceutical laced dream sessions with insecure Hollywood people to help them achieve their dreams, whatever they are. And it's really nebulous exactly how this technology works, how this treatment works. It's very comparable to an episode of Black Mirror stretched way too long. And like there's a Tarantino, sort of theory on filmmaking where he's talking about discrete scenes being stretched to their limit, just to get the audience right where you want them to be before you, give it to them. And this movie overstretches the whole thing. But there's reasons for why that happened. There's all these flashback sequences that, while they're good, on their own, really don't serve this movie enough. And there's a reason they exist, because she was just trying to find some way to get her movie made. So in like 2018, they went and shot all those flashbacks and just used what Kickstarter money they had to make a sizzle reel to convince someone to help them make the rest of the movie. And but at the same time, they're the thing that really takes you out of the nightmare dreamscape that this movie could have been. And that's disappointing, because when you're there, that's all that I wanted. It's like she's it yeah, the but at the because what becomes very clear is that Somnium is digging too greedily and too deep into the voids beyond the realm of sleep, but they don't get into what that creepy monster on that poster is. Like, you can make some assumptions about what it represents, but like I couldn't help but feel like there was this whole universe that she was not tapping into that would have been really compelling and cool. And that's unfortunate, because she clearly does have talent. And hopefully she gets a chance to make another movie, maybe even remake this one. That's kind of a trend we've noticed in horror. And overall, the destination is interesting, but it's not quite what one, like, she's no Ari Aster who's just blowing our minds, from the jump. And that's fine. There's a chance for her to elevate her own career and her own ability. And to me, this is more so a very worthy, story in what it takes to make a movie. No matter how well it turns out, she should feel very proud of herself. But I wouldn't pay money to see this in a theater necessarily. Like, I found other means to see this, I'll be honest. I didn't support its box office, so shame on me. But hopefully she gets another stab at another bite of the apple, as it were.
Yeah, I largely agree with you. I think that it's interesting, because I think it's like a pretty standard for like the whole length. And then in like the last 20 minutes, it gets really, really interesting and then it ends abruptly. And so I was kind of like, oh, damn. And, I, it's one of those rare times that I could have done with like more on a running time. I could have done with like 15 more minutes, not only because
Yeah.
it was, getting more interesting, but because there are a lot of things in the movie that are a little underdeveloped, like just the whole premise of the Somnium thing. There's so many questions there about what exactly this is, what's going on, and then the characters too. We don't get nearly enough of the Brooks. We don't
Yeah.
get, his all of his stuff seems very like detached from the rest of the movie, and we don't get nearly enough with like it's so weird that what is her name? Grace Van Dien is in this movie. From She had her stint in what's it called? Oh God, why am I blanking on it? The Netflix show about the Stranger Things. She had
Oh
her
yeah.
stint on that show, and of course she's actor Casper Van Dien's daughter, and so she just shows up in this movie for maybe like
That's
five
who
minutes,
that
and then she's
was in the
yeah,
party
and then she
scene.
just
Yeah.
yeah, and she's just gone, and so it's like yeah, there's certain things in this movie that are frustratingly superficial because of its short running time, and I'm assuming that had a lot to do with how much money she had to make it, and she probably ran out of money. She didn't have the time or the resources to make it longer, and so again, like you said, I'm willing to forgive a lot more with something like this, but I think it does reach a higher standard than something like a Shutter movie, like a direct to
Yeah.
Shutter movie, because of a really strong lead performance and just I keep going back to that final act, which really reminded me of a lot of Lynch stuff, and in particular, the video game Alan Wake. Like the talk show segment of that last 20 minutes was like directly out of Alan Wake 2. And so I
Hmm.
don't know if that was one of her like direct inspirations, but she's obviously inspired by Lynch, which itself inspires Alan Wake. And so there's a lot of connecting dots there. But yeah, I really I like this, and I do want to see what she does next too. But
Yeah, because
yeah, I don't know
in that
where do you
essay,
want to go?
just to say like no, she admitted that she had to take the hatchet to her initial script that she had
Oh,
been
sure.
working on for like almost 10 years. She had to just be like, okay, I need to get rid of this. I need to get rid of that. And
Mm.
I question some of those cuts if that's the case, because within there might be what seems to be missing. Because it's
Mhm.
one thing to say I'm going to cut corners on my set design because all I need is darkness. The audience will scare themselves more with what they can't see versus what I can show them. Like there needed to be some more connective tissue. And
Mhm.
yeah, because the Brooks character, he was really he subverted my expectations because he does kind of
Mhm.
come off as the sleazy Hollywood producer type who just like he just happens to be at some grungy arcade one night and just picks her out. And yeah, because I guess I almost wonder if he wasn't a Somnium patient himself, and Noah, the other worker there, hadn't inserted her picture into his treatment. Because like, why is he so fixated on this girl? What's the deal with that? Like there would have been neater to have some sort of an explanation there. But
Mhm.
yeah, because that's the other thing that doesn't quite get its due. It's like it she didn't react appropriately, I think, when she discovered the secret backup of like all of his illicit activities. Because I would have instantly taken that to the lady running the shop and being like, "Do you see what this motherfucker's doing to your patients? This is kind of a problem." Like
Mhm.
she's like, "I'm gonna need like a lot of blackmail money here." Like if I'm
Mhm.
not gonna go to the news with this, because yeah, that was something that made me go, "What's going on here? Why are we just continuously doing this loop of going to work, going back home, getting spooked in your grungy apartment, rinsing and repeating. The and I guess that was another element that like I never quite got an answer to was she losing time? Because she was always
Oh
so
yeah.
shocked as like, oh, I'm already late on rent. Well, it's like I have worked a midnight job before, like nighttime job before. I know it can be disorienting, but
Mhm.
she hadn't been there that long. How is she already like at the precipice of homelessness? And why hasn't she been paid yet? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think you're right there. I think that, there are a number of the one of the sort of through lines of the movie is what's real and what isn't. Like when is she actually in like the Somnium dream, and when does that happen? Is the whole movie a Somnium dream? We don't know. And I mean, the easiest explanation is that she enters the dream only at the very end when um Noah puts her under. But there are these sort of weird little hints throughout the movie that it's like, okay, is she already in this somnium dream? Like, just like the weird noises she's hearing and the creature thing, whatever that is. And as you brought up, the losing time thing, there's a reason why she has that weird little, like, contraption on her bedside that shows, like, the date,
Yeah,
um, there's other weird stuff. I mean, you already brought up how Brooks just appears. Like she's outside an arcade, kind of bummed out that she's not fitting in. And then this guy just walks up out of nowhere and says, like, you know, call me if you need any help. And then he gets into an SUV that wasn't there like 2 seconds ago and just drives off. And it's so there's all these weird sort of things that make it seem like, okay, this could all be a dream. It could have started earlier than we initially thought. I don't know. And it comes down to sort of the defining line of dialogue in the movie, which is she asks Noah, does Somnium actually change reality, or do I just perceive it differently? And then he just kind of thinks about it for a second and then says, what's the difference?
yeah,
Like, so.
yeah. Because one of the core inspirations for that aspect of the movie apparently is her own parents. Her dad was one of those guys who had a sleep deprivation tank in like the 90s and early aughts, who would go in there to meditate, and her parents were obsessed with The Secret and manifesting and all that stuff. So like that's where it all is informed from. And then she manifested, like, and her question in the essay is, did I manifest my film into existence, or did it just happen itself? And that's the conclusion that she had, is that it's like, she didn't do something special to will it into existence. She just got enough people on board with it over the years to make it happen. It wasn't something she did on her own. And that's the weird thing about what the somnium treatment is selling, because you're only the only like factor in the equation that's being affected is you, in theory. And it's just your own surety and confidence and ability to just not have doubts that, I guess, sort of like puts you in a position to be somebody else that makes other people believe in you. I don't know.
Mhm.
Yeah, because that brings us to the question: what is this creature who shows up like three times in the whole movie? And
Yeah.
and where is it coming from? What does it represent?
Yeah, I wonder, I kind of had just, I mean, the simplest explanation is it's like a manifestation of her doubt, I guess. Uh, and I could see that. I mean, the way that it's sort of the only significant scene that we really get of the creature, where it's not just there for like a spook, basically, is the ending scene where it appears in her dream and it's just kind of standing there, and she approaches it, and um she, I can't remember, does she like hug it, or
They get
does she like touch it
they
or
get like
something?
nose to nose, and she
Yeah,
just
no
like
snow.
stops being afraid of it and like looks it right in its gross little face, and
Yeah,
then it just evaporates
evaporates.
into a puff
Yeah.
of snow.
Okay. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I don't know if it is more complicated than that, than, manifestation of her doubts or manifestation of her anxieties, stuff like that. I'm not sure. Did you have a any other theory as to that?
Well, I still like my idea of it being just some kind of cosmic horror that
Hmm.
exists in a Lovecraftian realm in the base of all of our subconsciousnesses when we descend into them. Yeah, because
Hmm.
the when it started showing up, I questioned it. I'm like, is it just her exposure to the eroded psychosphere of the Somnium building that she's like bringing it home with her? Like that kind, like that's where my mind was going. It's like is this thing like attached to her or like visible to her because she has passed beyond the veil by being around the treatment and like what it's doing to people. That was my thought, but I guess I can appreciate the fact that she didn't just like have someone show up with a Necronomicon and be like, "Yeah, this is the Flugelmark," the Lord of Sleep, or something like that. Like they left it up to interpretation, which is probably the better way to go. But
Yeah,
there's
I like your theory. I like that because all of that stuff, in that final 20 minutes, it does hint at like a more like messed up, like layer below our dreams, with like the weird like cubing of all of the buildings like in her dream, like when they like disappear, and like the how it's basically she's just in like this black void, and there's these weird lightning storms that look like, like neural pathways,
yeah.
when they strike. And I all that stuff was really interesting to me, and I wish we had gotten more of it, but I understand why we didn't.
But I guess I just want to have some fun here. Somnium
Yeah.
2. What do we find out in Somnium 2? Is what she woke up to real? Everything, like the color grading just gets way brighter and more vibrant. And like I think you alluded to, it gets way too tidy at the end.
Hmm.
She's just like, "Oh, yeah, you're going to want to check that hard drive. I'm going to go home
Yeah.
and do some like is she like painting a wall in her
Yeah.
apartment she's going to get evicted from any day now, and she just hears this news story about how the guy just gets arrested for kidnapping when arguably he should be arrested for like gross sexual imposition, of
Hmm.
unconscious people. I mean, like how much evidence do they have of what this guy was doing? Probably a lot.
Hmm.
And because yeah, like what she's got this acting gig at the end. They just suddenly remember her and call her, and and what made that happen? Would that call have happened no matter what, or what did it only happen because she walked out of her Cloud9 procedure and could affect the reality around her? And
Sure.
what comes next? Who else is like who's gonna take it's like Jurassic Park? Who's gonna take over the Somnium procedure now? And what are they gonna
Yeah.
do with it? And what does this do to her career that she I'm sure gets to enjoy after the credits roll?
Yeah, I like that idea. I mean, I think like well, the her audition that, goes over very well. It's one of the best like acting scenes in the movie as far as the lead goes, and that happens before everything. If you subscribe to the idea that, the Somnium dream only happens in the last 20 minutes, And so I think that was always going to happen, the call that she was going to get back. And she always had it in her. She basically just needed to, dig down and believe in herself. I think she always had the talent. And so um as far as where the movie could go, I I thought they were going to do more with this. And again, this could be something else she was forced to cut, but I really, really like the idea of Gemma basically becoming the Max like character.
Yeah.
Max,
Yeah.
the like pop star, whatever she is, who appears on the talk show and then she sees at the party. And I really like the idea of Gemma becoming basically like that character in some sort of sequel. And then I don't know, she hears about a Somnium clinic in, I don't know, Buenos Aires that never closed because, things are more illicit down there and they can get by, with less strict like laws down there. And she like has to like shut it down or something like that. I have no idea, but yeah, I could totally see her becoming that Max like character.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's there, Rachel. If you're watching, there you go. Think about
Yeah.
it. Give us a story by credit or something.
Mhm.
Because I'm interested enough in the concept and what she left, off the field, and yeah, there's more that she could do with it. It's kind of like a Smile situation where after that first movie, I was ready to get more out of it,
Mhm.
and the sequel was okay, I thought, to that movie, but
Yeah.
this, like, is this wide releasing? I saw that it was like at the Roxy Cinema, but I don't know that is
Hmm.
like, was this at
No.
AMC?
No, no, no.
The
This was a VOD movie.
ah
I yeah, I rented it for, I think it was like 4.99. I rented it for. So,
okay,
yeah, direct to VOD, and so it probably isn't going to move the needle much for, I mean, maybe for her career because, she has this now on her resume. She has something to show. And so I totally could see us getting another movie from this woman, and she has the talent. And, like you brought up, especially in the horror genre, it's kind of become a trend now where horror directors will make a sort of proof of concept short that they'll just, throw up on YouTube or use as their, resume, their video resume, and then they'll go back and they'll remake the short as a feature film, or they'll even remake their freshman film again. They'll just
yeah,
remake the movie entirely because they get more of a budget. And that happens a lot in the horror genre these days. And
like
so I
Last
could totally,
Shift, I think, was one that did that.
yeah, lights
Oculus,
out.
Lights Out.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Oculus, lights out. Yep.
yeah,
So yeah, this it happens all the time. And so I could totally see this being remade with like a different, even like a different name or something like that. Or, maybe she has another idea, another screenplay idea that she wants to even just like set in the same universe or something like that. I don't
yeah.
know. But that could be cool.
It could be cool, and I mean, there's lots of places she could go with it. I would love for her to just go full Lovecraft, go full Lynch,
Hmm.
and just really get into the transcendental horror that she was, kind of dipping her toes in here. But yeah, it gets a recommendation from us, I'd say, and now it's time for the mentionables.
Yeah, so my mentionable this week is the Rogue Prince of Persia, which is a game available now for, I think, pretty much everything, as far as consoles and PCs go. And this is a game. Did you ever play Dead Cells?
Yeah,
The
I
game
did.
Dead Cells?
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay. So Dead Cells is a game I want to say, I mean, at this point, probably came out 7 or 8 years ago, but they just kept updating it and adding stuff to it. And I think it's eventually finally done. But that is a game I put so many hours into over the years. And this is made by the makers of Dead Cells. And it is, I mean, it is for lack of, being less creative here, it is Dead Cells in the Prince of Persia universe, and that's exactly what it is. So, which I'm totally down for. It's a roguelite, 2D roguelite. You're going on these runs to get, to try and get to the end, to try and get more weapons, more upgrades, more health, stuff like that. There's a, great deal of RNG that goes into your runs. And oh man, I thought this game was fantastic. I mean, I already finished it. It didn't take very long. It only took about, I want to say, 12 hours, something like that. But the thing that sets this apart from Dead Cells, the things that I think they learned from Dead Cells was this game has a lot more story to it. And you actually get kind of like almost like a quest log, which is something you never really got in Dead Cells. And this has to keep with the Prince of Persia theme, there's a lot of like wall running in this and a lot of like, flipping off of walls in the background of the scenes or flipping off of walls in front of you. And so that sort of carries over from the other Prince of Persia games. And yeah, just I really thought this was great. And I just, as sort of a to put a point on this topic, I gotta say, we are in like the month of all months for video games right now, where it's just like I can't do it. I can't do this all. I can't split my attention between, we've got like Silk Song over here, and we've got the new like Shinobi 2D game that is also fantastic. And I think a new Borderlands just came out, and the new fucking Hades 2
I was gonna say
now has Hades 2 now has a firm release date for the end of September. And it's just there's too much shit right now, and it's really hard to find the time. And I kind of had to give up on Silk Song because of that.
Heard it's
and because
really hard.
It is really hard. Yeah, it's really the only reason I even played it is because it's on Game Pass. I don't think I would have bought it otherwise, because I knew I was gonna fall off it because of its difficulty, and I did. And so, but I recognize that it's a good game. I can recognize a good game when I see it. And so,
in Metal Gear Solid Delta as well, like
that too.
Like I'm itching to play that just because I love Snake Eater so much. But the Hades, man, as soon as they got that announcement, I'm just fucking champing at the bit, because I have exhausted that game. Like, I have done literally everything I could possibly do. Like, even like the Chaos Challenge ladder, I've finished that out, and now I'm just watching speedrunners who are like already like pushing the fucking limits of human ability. Like, there are people beating that game in less than 4 minutes, doing at the highest difficulty with the most disadvantages, because they've optimized it so completely. That's how long early access has been going on, and I just want the story, man. Like, I just want to know, like what is all of this for? Because unlike the first game, you're not just trying to like escape your dad's house and find your long dead mom. In this one, like, there's an existential threat, and I don't know how that coheres with the nature of the game, where it's just endless in that sense. Because like eventually in Hades, you like finish the story, and your dad's like, you might as well keep testing security measures, and that's the excuse for why you just can keep doing runs. And I don't know how they can do that when, in theory, you need to kill Kronos. You have to kill the god of time. You have to stop the horror he's inflicting on everything. I don't know how they do that, unless it's some Disney ending where it's like, we all just love each other, right? But yeah, we'll have to see. My mentionable this week is kind of a shameless plug. I've been finally able to write a story about something that is, well, it may seem like, why do I care about a RV manufacturer in a tiny town in North Dakota suing state officials? You should care, because it's for $1.8 billion. That's what he's seeking damages for. and the underlying scandal, behind this lawsuit. The gist is this guy is the son of the man who co-founded Four Winds and Flying Dutchman RVs. So he's RV royalty, and he's a really interesting dude. I've gotten to know him really well over the last year because I've just been quietly talking to him, looking at his troves of documents and evidence and recordings, that he has with important people saying and doing things and acknowledging things that are really dubious. But the gist is has this proprietary RV manufacturing technology he wants to bring from his incubator in South Africa to the United States. All these states are trying to lure him with economic development dollars, and somehow North Dakota convinces him because there's a former aerospace manufacturing factory that's been vacant, just off of one of our Native American reservations, and it would be ideal. It's huge, and he could, clean it out, get set up, and get rolling, employ hundreds of people, get partnered with the local high school to set up a CTE center to train high schoolers to become employees. Like everybody was just like, oh, it's so much money, this is going to be great. But then he starts finding all of these, like a trailer full, like a semi trailer full of old documents from the aerospace defense work, like gyroscopes that go on the airplanes and the missiles and the submarines that were previously only made there, and evidence that this work had continued for 7 or 8 years after the site was supposedly shut down and stripped and was no longer doing that stuff. And that kickstarted a lot of federal investigations, and in turn retaliation against him, allegedly, by officials with the North Dakota Department of Commerce, who are all named as defendants in this lawsuit. Like, I could write a fucking book about this, but he's a whistleblower. He's been trying to sound the alarm on how the supply chain for these things that keep planes on position and at the right elevation has been compromised. If you've been hearing stories involving like planes suddenly changing altitude, it could be connected to what happened here. And the state allegedly knew about it. The state lied to him about the site no longer doing that stuff after 2015, and then retaliated against him once he found out the truth. And that's ultimately where this lawsuit is coming from. It's a very interesting story, and you can right now, I am the only journalistic entity in North Dakota and the nation writing about this, which I don't know if that signals that I'm crazy or he's crazy, but having been immersed in this and biding my time and taking my time and corroborating as much of it as I can, this is just the first in my series about this issue, and it could have far-reaching implications. But I'll have to talk to some former, Boeing and FAA whistleblower, people who've spoken to Congress who are very interested in this, to actually lock down how concerned we should be. Because I did go on a fucking plane to Denver this summer knowing full well that there could be something wrong with the gyroscope that keeps this plane upright and on track. But, do with that what you will.
Yeah, I hope that it continues to. You can keep writing about this and watch your garbage. Don't end up dead mysteriously.
Bro, it's funny, but this guy at one point told me, it's like, you should make sure you have life insurance because he's been
really
stalked.
Yeah,
he had and this is where it gets like really creepy. Like he was just at the park in Botano with his wife and daughter. They saw this weird car being driven by a dude in a black leather jacket and sunglasses while they were at the park. And while they were on their way home, that vehicle followed him and then parked outside of his house after they went in. And he got a photo of the license plate and a photo of the guy. And the registration on that vehicle expired in 2005 and was registered to an address that is literally just like an empty field off of a dirt road. And that's really bizarre. And like, and that checks out, you know, like much like the people, you know, covering the Munich Olympic hostage situation, you need more than one source. You need 2 to 3, you know, and 2 isn't quite enough, you know. And yeah, it's like, it's been a battle, you know, to, you know, because my publisher has so much other shit that he's thinking about. He really isn't interested in this yet. I have to concede. You know, he still thinks that, you know, Mr. Hofer is kind of a kook, but so does everybody else. But I don't think that if you're thinking that way, you haven't actually looked at what this guy has. It's
Sure.
And if you really are interested in this, he has done like hours worth of interviews with a local podcast called The Decodin, which is based in Minot. And I will link to that because like that's really where he lays everything out, provides his documents, plays you the audio of people saying certain things. And yeah, it's way too dense to get into, and I've taken enough time talking about it. I'm just very excited I get to do my job at long last. But, you know, in the meantime, people are already acting like it's spooky season. Spirit Halloween is already open for fucking business. Yeah. We already have our ghost spider costume for November that she's been asking for a year. And you should watch Somnium. Start easing yourself into your spooky mood. Get ready for all that good stuff to come out. But what's our schedule look like for the rest of the month, Matt?
Yeah, so I believe, you know, if everything goes according to plan, we should have a mini-sode from you. We will have a featured review of the new Paul Thomas Anderson movie, One Battle After Another. And then I'm glad you brought up Halloween, because during our next episode, our next podcast episode, I will be presenting my sort of annual Hollywood or Halloween October movie marathon list. And so if people aren't familiar, basically, I think for the past 3 years now, this will be the 4th year, I've made this list of movies I'm going to watch in the month of October leading up to Halloween, and I'll talk about them on the show. I'll review them on the show. And so I will be presenting that during our next episode.
It's a highlight of the year. There's always some deep cuts. And it's also good to know what's a complete waste of time, because there is a lot of slop that comes out. But thank you for watching. Thank you for joining us. And have a good month of September, everybody.
See ya.